Connecting with Purpose is about doing what matters most in a time when our families, workplaces, and communities need us. This show from Purpose Views presents honest conversations about what's possible when we invest in helping our people be their best, purposeful selves. You'll hear the challenges of making those investments and tips for reaping their rewards. This show is designed to help people-first leaders like you create the impact you seek. Let me introduce you to the purpose-driven and real-talking hosts, Mark, Neil, and Nell.
Welcome, everybody. I am really excited today to have a really good friend of mine, Dallen Stanford, join us for Connecting with Purpose. Dallen is a former USA Sevens rugby international. He was a director at Play Rugby USA, putting rugby into underserved communities all across the city there, changing lives through rugby. And at that time started getting into broadcasting and really kind of following that passion. Dallen, in a very short period of time, has an incredibly long resume that you can just see building and building and building in the world of broadcast, from things as big as the Sevens World Series, traveling around the world, to domestic competitions, Premier Rugby Sevens and Major League Rugby, to international competitions, and most recently culminating, but not ending, this is just the beginning of a journey, with being a lead commentator in the Rugby World Cup 2023 that just finished historically a couple of weeks ago. Dallen is also a host of two rugby-related podcasts, Rugby Sevens Roller Coaster and Rugby Hive. And the Rugby Hive is where every legend has a story, and he's there to share it. But today he's here to share his story, so it's absolutely awesome. So a bit of a different episode, and if you think I've got positive energy, wait till you hear this guy. You may not be able to absorb all of it. So Dallen, mate, it's awesome to have you. Thanks for joining us on Connecting with Purpose.
Well, Griff, firstly, I have so much respect for what you've done in your career so far and what you continue doing. One of my highlights is working with you at Play Rugby USA. So it is full circle to finally be here with you, connecting and talking all things purpose.
Brilliant. Well, let's dive into magic moments. I gave you a little bit of context around what these are, and for any listeners that have heard them before, they understand. But the quick headlines are: a magic moment with a benefit of time is a 10 out of 10 moment because of how that moment impacted your life from that point on. And it doesn't necessarily mean it was a super positive magic moment. Some of them are. Some of them are more around tragedies and challenges and things that we have to overcome. But when you look back on it and you see how it impacted what came next, it was pivotal and therefore magic. And there's three parts to the question. Firstly, there's three magic moments, but the parts of the question are: when you think of your kind of life or career, what are the magic moments? What was it about them that made them magic? And if you had to give them a name, what would you call them?
I love this question, firstly, Griff. And so the first moment that comes to mind was a massive impact that had on me as a young teenager living in South Africa. It was just after the apartheid era had ended, and South Africa got a chance to host the Rugby World Cup in 1995 after decades of sporting isolation. And it was a potential volatile situation. As a teenager, I didn't quite grasp, obviously, the full context of South Africa's past, but at the same time knew that when Nelson Mandela became the first democratic elected president of South Africa, this was a very positive thing for the country. But at the same time, there were some clashes of people who still believed in the old system. So with Madiba, out of prison after being there for 27 years, after the terrible apartheid system, he chose to unite all South Africans through the sport of rugby, which is a sport I was passionate as a young kid about. So I'll never forget watching the Springboks play and having every single South African from all walks of life wearing the South African jersey. Madiba was wearing the number 6 jersey as well, to showcase to all South Africans, which rugby back then was traditionally a white sport in South Africa. South Africa, of course, has 11 different languages, so it's a really mixed country. So to bring people together, it was an unbelievable task what he did. And I'll never forget watching South Africa beat the defending champions Australia. I saw the game live. Then we watched the final. They beat New Zealand. Nobody would imagine they'd do that. Joel Stransky kicked the winning drop goal in extra time. And I remember celebrating in the streets with South Africans of all different colors. And it was amazing for the first time to be that connected to your countrymen through the sport of rugby. And so, looking back now, I mean, obviously I realized that many years ago how pivotal that moment was, because I knew I wanted to use sport to, even if it's changing one person's life, if I can impact somebody positively. Madiba did that in a country of people that were very divided. And in society today, we are still very divided, but there are ways you can bring people together. And so that quote, I have it in my room, sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire, to unite people in a way that little else does, and to speak to youth in a language they understand. So that definitely was number one that stood out. And I think you were asking, what do you call that moment? I call that moment, it's actually from the Rugby World Cup theme song, World in Union, because I feel like that's kind of what it is. It brings people together. And still to this day, any sport has the power to do that. It just happens to be rugby, of course, is our sport. Second magic moment for me would probably be looking back on my career. My life changed dramatically. I spent my first 25 years in South Africa, and then I took a holiday after finishing university to come to America just for 6 months to travel to California. I had one friend from university that was living here, and he introduced me to a rugby club. There happened to be a South African guy coaching the team, and I played for them, had a wonderful time. They got me a visa to come back to America. And those sort of pivotal moments changed my life, because I met my wife to be at the Springbok Bar in Los Angeles, the only South African bar and restaurant, where I happened to be working cash in hand to get some money. And that changed my life forever. So that definitely is a huge moment. To summarize that one, I suppose I would say taking opportunities, because, a lot of it, to leave your home country, you've done it as well, but it's something massive. You have family and friends behind. And I do remember how sad it was leaving my mom and dad when I said, hey, I'm going back to America, and my wife's there. And they were like, well, we'll see you again, but limited times, but with that, you must take the opportunities in life. So that definitely was number two, very personal. Number three, I suppose if I look back on my career so far, the opportunity to represent the USA on the Sevens World Series, when my parents came over and my wife's family were there to watch me play in person, that was very, very special. You'll never get that opportunity again. And then on the broadcasting side of things, sitting alongside Joel Stransky at the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan, commentating together for World Rugby was surreal, and it goes back to my memory number one as a 16-year-old South African. So full circle there as well, and it's amazing that if you do follow your passion, you can end up in these unbelievable moments. You never could write them down as a young kid. I mean, obviously would love to have played rugby for my country or a country. That did come true, but the commentary one, I didn't even know was on the horizon. And so, yeah, those are my moments. I suppose that one would be called Follow Your Passion.
Love it. And that's a really fantastic tee up to a bit of a follow-up question, really, because you're one of the people I reference regularly vis-a-vis following your passion. And I think to some people it probably seems a little bit like romanticized. Oh, follow your passions, and I'm an example of somebody that's done that as well in a different way. And I know that actually it's not always a super smooth road, because if you're passionate about something, you really, really care about it, and that can amplify the level of stress that's kind of involved with that. And maybe we'll dig into that a little bit later. But when you think about having followed your passions, and we kind of think about purpose as like passion plus impact, and then kind of at the intersection of those two things, well, what do you do with it? Like, what is the path you follow? How do you spend your time and energy? When you kind of just think about those three elements of passion, impact, and application, how would you kind of articulate what you feel your own purpose is, and how how you discovered that?
Yeah, that's another good question to unpack. I suppose if I just look at passion first, my passion is for the love of rugby because of its values and what it can do for society. So that's definitely a passion. Involved in that as well is making people smile and laugh wherever possible, because the world obviously is a place that can bring people down, and there are a lot of negative things in the world. So I think wrapped up in that passion, is then in what I do is there are different ways you can deliver that, of course. And so, through Play Rugby USA, that was a great way to have that impact and that application come into place as well. Working with young kids and providing positive role models for them, and creating opportunities that they could be part of a community. And and how they can get valuable life lessons from that as well. So I think that definitely, is something that intersects there as well. And then the broadcasting side of things, I suppose that's where it comes into making the game exciting and spreading the love of the game to as many people as possible, that maybe if they listen to it, they're like, well, this is a really interesting game. I get more enjoyment out of it. I maybe laugh and maybe smile as well. But on the actual other work side of things, so we work together for Play Rugby USA. Well, interesting enough, there's a new project I'm working on, which also is a non-contact rugby game to grow the game in North America and globally using flag or touch, but helping rugby clubs become sustainable. Because I believe if more people can take part in the game at any level, and you don't have to play for your national team, it could just be going out once a week and playing with friends. You can improve your life by having more community around you, making more friends, being physically active, and having that connectivity. And so if I can help, lay the groundwork for that, and other people can benefit like I'm benefiting from being involved with it because it's so exciting for me, I think it's a win-win-win situation.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously I'm kind of cut from the same cloth in terms of appreciating those values and being passionate about kind of, if you like, spreading the gospel of rugby. And while I haven't been doing that for a few years, I spent many years doing that as well. And I just for the audience won't be so familiar with this, but I in a way, I kind of want to just maybe bridge from, say, business to rugby a little bit, right? I think there's a couple of different ways of doing that. One is when you think about some of the rugby values, and then you think about some of the values that a leader might need in a business. What are some of the things that kind of stand out to you as kind of things that rugby players have to exhibit in order for their team to be successful that could apply across to the kind of to teams at work being successful as well?
Yeah, that's another good topic as well. I would say things that translate well in the sport of rugby, you have to do everything yourself on the field. And so you in the game itself, you'll tackle and you'll run with the ball. Well, you might not be a good tackler, but you do need to improve that, so that you help your team out. So I think in the business world, you need to be well balanced in what you deliver. You have obviously assets and skill sets that bring you to that position. But if you can improve on the things that you are lacking as well, I think that'll be vital also. One key aspect, I think, too, is treating everybody with kindness and treating everybody equally. That's vitally important. It doesn't matter what position you're in. Everybody working at any business or anybody, even somebody who's serving you food or somebody, everybody should be treated equally in life. And I think that's also another important characteristic to have. For me, I think in the business world and in the sporting world, it might not apply to rugby, but it generally, and it's something that I like to live my life by, and you mentioned at the beginning, is the positivity. If you can see the world and see people in a positive light and give them the benefit of the doubt and showcase positive things for them, but leading by example, I think that can bring the best out of people as well. If you are a positive person that smiles a lot and brings good energy to everything, you can help raise the level of the people around you as well to want to do better because you care so much about what you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've literally written about both of those, like, if you like, caring and happiness as two specific elements that are fundamental, really, and to performance, right? And that it's fair to say that people aren't going to care about you unless you care about them. People aren't going to care about a thing unless you show that you care about them. And certainly in sport and in team sports and in rugby, everyone's got each other's backs and they show that care in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it might not be very kind to the opposition, but it's because you're there to respect and have the backs of your teammates because you have a shared purpose and you're all there together and you can't succeed without each other. And often I think caring is such a foundational element of leadership on or off any sporting field and in or out of business that it's so fundamental it often just kind of gets overlooked. And so sometimes these just really foundational elements, right? But showing care, being positive energy is infectious. So is negative energy. So do you want to leave a positive weight behind you or a negative one? Because you're leaving one behind you every day anyway. And just on a personal note, of all the people I know, you have a gift for making people feel whole and happy. And I think that is an incredibly powerful gift for you to have, not just as a broadcaster, but as a coach and as a director of a program, and whatever you go on to do. And I think that can't be understated. So when you think about, if you think about your journey a little bit, maybe just walk us through a little bit, kind of like some of the stepping stones you took on kind of following your passion, and maybe some of the upsides and downsides of that. Like, there was probably risks along the way. You were probably doing a lot of juggling. You probably weren't getting to live in a big mansion and drive an amazing car because you were having to, really just roll your sleeves up and try all these things out. Talk us through what that journey was like a little bit, and maybe some of the milestones.
Yeah, so it's a great point. You're speaking about the car. I do remember driving a car that a friend gave me when I first arrived in 2003 in the US. It was obviously almost broken down, and it looked like bullet holes in the front of the car. It was so shot. It was run to the ground. But I was so thankful because I could get around. In Los Angeles, there's not a lot of public transport, so you need a car to get around. But yes, I'll never forget that car. And then eventually I did break down on the 405 highway, one of the biggest highways in the world. It was quite ominous and quite a scary moment. But again, let's go back to the steps.
And they weren't bullet holes?
No, they weren't bullet holes.
Okay, good.
But the car was run down. But I'll never forget, it was steaming out the front. So luckily my car works these days. The stepping stones, if I had to look back now, are all there are definitely some upsides and downsides. I remember living out of my bag when I was staying on the couch when I arrived in 2003 in America, and it was the generosity of the rugby club. They put me up, for 6 months. So I stayed at various friends' houses, and I was so thankful to, the people that took me in, because sometimes they would pay for my meals and things like that. Because brand new in the country, only had the rand exchange rate from South Africa, the dollar is ridiculous, So it wasn't in my favor, but. The stepping stones were to get involved in the sport of rugby. Obviously, I love playing the game. I love coaching the game. So shortly after I got actually a work visa to be legal in the country to work, I started coaching at the Occidental College Club. I played for the alumni side, and so I was coaching for the men's college side. And that was a wonderful experience to work with young students, 20 years of age or so, and, sort of be a role model for them. But also I do remember I didn't have kids myself and everything like that, but I remember being, okay, well, my parents were amazing about instilling life's values and how to be a good person on and off the sports field. And so my biggest thing was, I didn't like people when I played against them that would, slag off people or, say negative things or always aim for just the winning side of the sport. So I was really big, like, this is really cool. I've got an opportunity now to spread the love of the game, but also spread the values to showcase that, listen, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Yes, it's great if you win, cool, but you will not be you'll not be remembered for that, but you remembered how you play the game and the people around you. And so that was a very unique and formative experience coaching there. And that led me then to eventually working with you at Play Rugby USA, we're working with younger kids, elementary and middle school kids in the youth development program there. But at the same time, as you mentioned, juggling different jobs in the space of rugby was hard, because I could easily have gone to work for a regular full-time job in something I wasn't passionate about, something that brought money in, that may have paid my rent and helped me live a bit. But I was always keen. My father was always instrumental, my mom too, about saying, do something you love if you can. And so my dad was an accountant, and he liked numbers, I assume, but it wasn't exactly his true passion, let's say. My mom was a teacher, and she really was passionate about that. So that was fantastic. And I didn't want to be behind a desk like my father was from 8 to 5, but he gave me the tools and helped me say, listen, if you can get your education, which I did in marketing and media, so it's always an interest of mine. So sports marketing and media was what I was captivated towards in the rugby field. And then that coaching side that my mom had brought to the table, I was like, I could work in rugby, do something I love doing, and while it might not, be a massively high-paying job at the time, I can still stay in the field. And so that's kind of how I bounced around until I was a player at the USA, and then broadcasting knocked on my door, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to commentate? You talk a lot, you love rugby, so it'll be a good blend." I mean, I would even interview after rugby games, like just with a little flip camera, not for any publication, but I'd interview my teammates about the game and have a laugh and have a joke. And so people saw that. And so one guy said, listen, you would be very good as a, sideline commentator or broadcast commentator. And so it's funny because you do something you love, we talk about, and the opportunities kept opening up. And I think rugby is unique and sports unique that way, because I got a chance then to travel as a media manager. So my background, say, was marketing and advertising, and I love media. So USA Rugby said, well, Dallen, you can be the media manager and go to the Rugby World Cup in New Zealand in 2011 with Team USA, and that could be your role. And so I took that. It was a paid opportunity. Now I got to travel, of course. The one downside you did say, what were the negative parts, is leaving your family members behind. So, I did travel a lot when I was playing on the Sevens World Series, and then traveling again as a media manager and all those opportunities. But we'll come back to that side a bit later. So got a chance to go to Russia for the Sevens World Cup as a media manager. And so those opportunities keep coming. And then the broadcasting world, you're not necessarily a full-time broadcaster in the US because there's only a few rugby opportunities. So I would work with Player Rugby USA, and you were gracious about giving me time off on the weekends to go travel and commentate as well. So I've always kind of had a hybrid of rugby jobs that I do, which has kept my career interesting because it's not just one thing. It's working with kids maybe during the week, and then it's commentating an international game on the weekend and preparing for that and delving into that kind of thing. Or it's content creation for another entity, whether it's remote or in person. So I've always had a few different rugby jobs, and someone asked me, what do you do? And I said, I work full-time in rugby. And they're like, oh, that's great. Nowadays I can say I'm an international broadcaster because that is predominantly what I do. But those stepping stones to kind of where I ended up today, it's been pretty fascinating because I've done, as you said, all the coaching roles, done the media roles. I still do some content creation. I have some podcasts to be involved in, and growing the game through Flag Rugby X, a couple of brand ambassador roles, and then I commentate around the world. Now, luckily, I'm in a position where I can choose the jobs I want to do. So that I don't ever work a 9 to 5, but I'll do the Rugby World Cup for a month, and then I'll come back and have a month off. And then I'll do some other commentating jobs and some remote things here and there. So the one thing I think what is so valuable about creating your own career or independent contractor role is that you can then get your time back. Because that's the one thing we obviously can't choose. If you work for a company, they'll tell you need to be here 8 to 5, or this is where you need to be. But in an independent contractor role, you can decide what your time looks like. So my wife and I go a lot, and we go Airbnb everywhere around, or she comes along on some rugby trips. So, I've come to create the world I want to live in terms of that balance and that time, because the negative side of it was my most successful year in terms of work-wise wasn't my most successful year in terms of, my marriage, because of my traveling, every single weekend of the year. And that's not very good. So I've come to find the balance of that. And I think that's important too, where you can get caught up in ego and say, oh, I want to do all these great things, it's all these beautiful events, but you do need to keep yourself on a balanced track if you want to live a successful life.
Yeah, I mean, I think finding some of that harmony is something that everybody's striving for, and a lot of the folks we work with, and the leaders and the teams that we work with, that's one of the things that's kind of on their plate, because they are either in the office or working, but they're working for set periods of time, and it's always incredibly busy, and time and energy are these just finite. Energy is not necessarily finite, time is finite, but being intentional with your energy during those time slots is absolutely key. And you've been able to craft that in a way that, like you said, you can take a month and everything else. When you look back on those various different roles, and I think there's a few obvious things, right, around just your kind of your positive personality and your belief in the values and the belief in the kind of the impact that the game can have and that sports can have, in the way that Medina described it. When you look back on all those things, have you had to kind of try to bridge the gap from any synergies, like things that, when I think about characteristics I was exhibiting coaching, they're pretty much applied this way in broadcast, and they're applied this way with kids versus this way with college. And when you just start thinking about all those things, what would you say is some sort of foundational characteristics or behaviors maybe that you have exhibited that are maybe applied differently in those different professional roles, but at the end of the day, they're kind of just the essence of you being at your best?
Yes. If I think about that, I would say number one, which is a characteristic of hard work and homework and things like that. My parents always instilled that in me. So when I'm preparing as a commentator, people always comment, they say, oh, it sounds like you know so much about these players. It's because I've done my homework. So that's a kind of vital thing. And in the other fields of like coaching and stuff like that, just so you know the X's and O's, you come prepared, you'll be working with kids. You've got young kids running around. You need to know what you're doing. So I think that's important, is to, and that can be in any field, to make sure you actually do the hard work that needs to be done, so that, when it does come time to shine, you can be successful in whatever you do. So I think that's kind of number one that's been instilled with me. So a lot of people in the commentating world will just maybe listen to the game for the 2 hours and they're like, wow, that's a thrill. Like, it doesn't even sound like you're working much because you're just talking about the game and you love it. And it is the case, but they don't see the 6 days before where you're working tirelessly to get this information and to think about creative things to say and to kind of bring it to life, I suppose, as well. Another characteristic, I suppose, would be integrity, right? About and all those values we bring up about being a good person and portraying that in what you do as well. So in the commentary world, it's reflected in being positive about the referees, the officials, the people that play the game, always shedding a positive light on people to kind of bring that out and to promote the game in its best light. So there might be a fight in the game, but you don't want to harp on that as well, because yes, it has happened and you need to call what you see. But at the same time, you wouldn't just focus on the positive elements also. And the same as playing wise as well. There's going to be times where coaching, where a player does something which leads to the opposition scoring or things like that, but you're there to encourage them and to build them up as well, because so they can have better moments later in life or later in the game. And so I think those are things that carry over as well into the business field also, because again, we're all going to get knocked down whatever we do. We're all going to make mistakes in any world. Like I had one in the World Cup recently where the ball kicked across field. It was hard to see, and both wingers are wearing scrum caps, and so I called the wrong name. And so that's, for me, obviously not great, because you want to ID the right players at the right time. But you do have to flush things that mistakes you make, and then move on. Because if you focus on that in any live kind of situation, you will produce negative results as the game gets on. So, like I remember we were playing for the USA Sevens, and we went through a string of games where right at the end we would lose it. And our coach came to us and said, okay, we need to get to the bottom of this. Why are we giving away the ball, or why are we doing this at the end of the game? And in our minds, we kind of were slumping at that last little bit. So we worked with a sports psychologist that was very good about saying, okay, we're going to come up to something in life that you're going to make a mistake. In the rugby field, I would drop a ball or something, or miss a tackle, and then I keep thinking about that error the whole time. They said you have to flush it. And if it physically means making a flushing motion like you're flushing a toilet, you've got rid of that. It's in the past now. Now I need to focus at the next task at hand. And that can be applied to everything in life. So in any situation I get to with my wife too, something will happen. I'll say, we've got to flush it. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, don't worry about it. It's in the past now. We can't do anything about it. The only thing we can control is what we do next. And she will get irritated because obviously it's for me, it's easy because I've gone through it. She's like, no, I still want to talk about the thing that happened in the past. I'm like, no, let's move forward. Because that's the only way you can correct things and make it better, I suppose.
Well, and I think the main point in that is to not harp on it, but to learn from it, and then focus on the next job with the learnings, right? So the intention is you don't make the mistake again, but and you don't harp on it. You learn from it quickly. And you reposition yourself for the next job. And so if I was to summarize those, I think there was an element of just sheer work ethic, right? Just hard work, combined with preparation, which like coaching would be having a game plan, but in broadcasting it's having that kind of game plan, having a script, having all the information there, catching the positives, like intentionally looking for the positives and calling out the positives, doing the right thing. Which is kind of just doing the right thing to the values and to the people that are there, to respect the people that are there, and then to accept the fact that as present and as focused and as good and as well prepared and hardworking as you are and have been, we're human and we're going to make mistakes. So learn from it, focus on the next job, and move forward. And if you've got to flush it down the toilet, flush it down the toilet.
There we go.
I love those, and I just think they're really again kind of fundamental kind of takeaways for everybody, that often we're so focused on the what in front of us that there's so much going on, and there's so many things being piled on, and there's in sport and in life, like the flack, the curveballs, the things that are thrown at you when you get blindsided or whatever, and in work, those happen real time all the time, because you don't have the luxury of practicing and then performing. You've got to kind of perform all the time. So your ability to be able to ground yourself in your best self characteristics and behaviors gives you a really valuable perspective on how to be present, how to have control over your emotions and not to get emotionally hijacked, but to take that space you need to think forward to what you're trying to achieve, ground yourself in your values, and then say, oh, what's the decision I want to make next? And so just tying those comparisons together, because I think it's really interesting for me and hopefully for others to see somebody that's in a completely different space, but actually grounded in a lot of the same things that would be success factors for everybody. So quick look forward. If you're going to fast forward 10 years, say, what are some aspirations? Because it seems like you're kind of already living the dream. Like what does success look like for you in 10 years in terms of kind of what you're doing, maybe the impact that you want to have had, and just overall kind of like your meaningful experiences and relationships?
Yes, I think you're right. I'm very fortunate to have been given all these opportunities in different spaces, and it's taken me around the world, and I've met unbelievable people, and I've made so many good friends in the space. I feel like to keep using my opportunities to make a difference where possible in the field. Like we said, some of those are unintended, and some of those are more focus driven. So this new venture that I'm working with, we're going to be launching next year. Perry Baker is one of our ambassadors, which I think is so great. I think also there is one aspect too. I remember being a player for the USA, and you as well. We weren't full time in that, we had to do other jobs to help us earn a living as a rugby player. Well, these days they're playing rugby full time for sure, but not with massive salaries. So after the game, where do those players go? And I think it's important to keep the rugby IQ in the game as well. I'm like you, heavily invested in growing the sport from the younger ages up. But at the same time, I do want to see the national team for the USA Rugby be successful, because with more funding will be more opportunities for people to get into the game. And it can be the non-contact version of the game too, which I think is great. So you and I are on the same page with the values rugby particularly can bring to society, where living in America for the last 20 years, it's been interesting, obviously coming from South Africa, terrible issues there and still are. Same for America, even though America, people see it though as a country that has it together. It doesn't in many ways. So I feel like where I can make a difference in my field will be continually growing the game, introducing new people to the sport, as I said, even if it's non-contact frame, bringing alumni back into the fold who can help support the game in that way as well, I think is vital. So I still play beach rugby a minimum once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, for that community factor, for that fitness factor, and because I just love the game and it's safe. It's easy to play. It's hard to roll in the sand, but it's easy to play. And so I feel like if more people can get more opportunities to be in that space as well, I think it can create a positive difference. Because again, we don't always have to work in something that we love. I mean, great. If you can work in something you love, that's great. But if you can have meaningful moments each week that you really cherish, whether it's meeting with, for a drink or a meal with friends, or playing a fun activity or in your community, that's also very positive as well, and that can help people, through difficult times, which I think is important. So I suppose down the line, 10 years, yes, it's whether it's in the broadcasting space. There's a project I'm working on next year too, which is going to be launching, which is helping young broadcasters get more experience and get into the field. I was never trained in broadcasting. Unfortunately, would love to have done a journalism course as well. But I feel like because of all these wonderful co-commentators I've worked alongside, the best in the world, I've learned so much from them. So if I can transfer that knowledge to younger people coming in, they can have opportunities, and you can commentate till 70, 80 years old. That's the great thing. And with remote opportunities as well available these days, like I just did a game the other day, a game played in Spain, with a team from Georgia and a team from Israel, and here I'm in Los Angeles calling the game. Obviously, my wife is saying, "Hey, there." But there's a lot of opportunities for people to work in the space of rugby that they might not even know about. So if I can be a voice for them and for that, and guide them towards those opportunities, that's something that I'm definitely going to be doing.
I literally just listened to a podcast today with Adam Grant, who's got a new book out, and he's a very well-renowned kind of organizational psychologist from Wharton. and professor, and he was commentating on the fact that one of the best ways to learn is to teach. And so I just think that's really cool that you didn't have any professional broadcast training, journalism school. You had a passion for media, and the kind of broadcast side of sports and sports media, sports marketing. You had a passion and obviously experience in the game, coaching the game, and then just sort of naturally be the person taking the videos after the game. And it's just you were kind of going in that direction. But to be able to create something that's so authentic to coach, train, teach, whatever word you want to use, other aspiring broadcasters, is such an incredible way to give back and enable other people to follow their passion or to identify whether or not that is a passion for them. Either way, they have a bit of fun and learn something, right? So, there's one last question we'll come to in a second, which is kind of around kind of legacy and impact and that sort of stuff. And if you don't mind, what I wanted to do is take you through kind of one of the coaching activities we do with folks, to see how it lands. And if it doesn't land well, we can edit it out. But I'd be interested to see kind of get what your thoughts are on this, because some of the questions we've had and some of the ways we've been thinking about things, and it's called Bridge to Impact. So it's all about the outcome from this is being able to articulate the impact, the meaningful difference, if you like, that you would be proud to have made. And let's just say fast forward 10 years and this is the meaningful difference you'd be really proud to have made, through 3 or 4 different ways that you might have generated possibilities or mindsets or growth outcomes for the people that you either directly interact with or indirectly interact with. And so the way to get there is this. The beginning of the bridge is your best self characteristics. I'm hardworking, I prepare, I do my homework, I'm completely in the moment, I'm catching the positive, I care about the people, I do the right thing, and I don't dwell on mistakes, I learn from them and I go forward. So that's some of your best self characteristics, and there's others, of course. And that's at the beginning of the bridge. And all of the people, which we call your we, the people you surround yourself with the most over the next 10 years, which for you is probably quite a lot of people, they're all having this vibrant conversation talking about all these amazing characteristics you have, right? And the other side of the bridge is the ultimate impact that they go on to make in the world. But the journey across the bridge includes 3 or 4 milestones that are growth milestones for them, that they have experienced in part as a result of having known you. So because I've known Dallen, I have experienced this, I've developed this skill, I have this mindset, whatever those things might be. It's a hard question to put someone on the spot for, but if you can envision yourself like from broadcasting, from coaching, and just thinking about, well, what would be some of those things people might say about me that are based upon growth outcomes I've helped them develop? What springs to mind?
I would say, so thinking about myself, I think one of the greatest assets that I've been given through my parents and through my upbringing is seeing the world in a positive light and seeing every situation in a positive light. So I think hopefully if that did come across to people, they would be able to, if faced with any situation, being able to see the positive and how to move forward in that way. So a good example is when I was about 16 years old, I was obsessed with playing rugby, but I got injured. I hurt my leg quite badly, had an operation, and I was out of the game for like 8 months. So I was watching everybody play, and I couldn't. But in that situation, I was lucky enough to say, okay, now I've got time to do all the things I couldn't do while I was playing the game. So I could read more, I could, pick up other interests. So I think and that's a negative situation, turning that into a positive situation. So I think if people who do know me and know me really well are able to always see the positive thing and always focus on the positive thing too. But, I'm not necessarily a fan of people complaining about things and what can you do about it? Rather action the items, what you can do positive to make a difference in your life. That's how you're going to get anywhere, as opposed to saying, oh, I didn't get the job. Oh, focus on another job or focus on something else and get you. So I think if people can do that, I know they can be very successful in all forms of life because it's helped me to get to where I am today. So I think that is one thing for sure.
And that's
that's
a great one for the, if you like, at the beginning of the bridge, right? Because it's a mindset thing. I'm looking for the positives. I'm focusing on the positives, and I'm focusing on the things I can control that enable me to move forward with something that I've seen that's positive. So I love that as a starting point. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, and as you said, the things you can control, because there's so much we can't control in life. You hear, and there's things do happen all the time, but those are things you can actually physically control. I suppose another one would be, if like yourself, people see you, and I saw what you were doing, and I was like, well, Griff's making a positive difference in the space of that he can control in the rugby world, by founding Play Rugby USA and giving all these people opportunities. So it's similar to me, I suppose, in that my goal would be to spread the love of the game. Hopefully people can take that love and start a youth program. Or, I've spoken to a lot of the kids we work with in LA, a lot of the young kids, and their parents come to and say, so-and-so is now playing rugby, tackle rugby, because we started the flag program at this club. And now they've made all these friends, and they're going to go to university and they're going to play rugby there. So you wouldn't know that unless you speak to the people. So it's amazing to find those kind of things out there too. So the fascinating thing is, one of the projects I worked on was, and you and I would speak about this a lot, about how much impact can one person make, and what is the best way to impact a larger group of people. And in the rugby space, we found that maybe coaching coaches or training trainers would be good, because you can then, get to the maximum number of people and kids. And so that's one thing we did. We took 100 American coaches and we took them to England across before the pandemic for about 3 or 4 different trips at different times, for them to experience professional coaching in the Premiership, to ask questions of everybody in the different levels of leadership there and the different fields, and then come back to the US and focus on what they've learned from there and keep in touch with those coaches so they can elevate the game and increase the IQ in the sport as well. So I think, getting more strategic in terms of, if I can help more coaches as well through things that I'm doing, they can have a great impact. And again, I won't know that impact, but I know that they're in the space doing positive things to this day.
Yeah, I mean, it's a force multiplier, isn't it?
Yes.
We used to say for every coach we recruit, that could be 50 kids. It's a lot easier than trying to recruit 50 kids. And so that's a huge force multiplier, taking those 100 people over there. So this is looking for catching the positive, following the positive based on things you can control, and then kind of inspiring people to want to kind of be a force multiplier themselves, right? So Dallen gave me this opportunity, I want to pass this opportunity on, but then also providing them with some opportunities and skills that enable them to more effectively do that. Probably gives them the confidence or the belief to kind of to go after that, because it's not necessarily an easy thing to do. I love that. That's awesome, mate. And I did put you on the spot there, but I was saying to you earlier, 95% of the folks we work with haven't thought about articulating the impact they want to have. And when you get really clear about that, even though you're already doing it, it enables you to be more intentional about it and to do it more and to be even more of a force multiplier. And that's why we go through that exercise. All right, look, we've probably got to wrap up. We can talk all day here, easy. The last thing is just, it's very related. It's very related to this, really. And this is kind of, if you like, you kind of fast forward all the way to, you've lived your best life, right? And you and Verity there, lying on the beach, looking back, going, "Oh, that was a pretty good life." What do you want people to say about you? How do you want to be remembered?
Oh, that's a hard question. You don't often think about that, right? Or I don't think about that much, I suppose, in that, because you're always putting out, hopefully we're always putting out our best selves so that people will remember your best self. I suppose for me, in all that I do as well, I do like the lighter side of life. And so hopefully some people would say one day, they'll be like, "Oh, that Dallen guy, he made me laugh." And I think that's kind of cool. While it might not be as meaningful or impactful, maybe as some of the other things, I think, especially in the broadcasting world, you can be quite stagnant and things like that. So me personally, I love to have a laugh, because I do think positivity, laughing, all those things, as you said, smiling are important things in life. I love it too, because there's no greater gift when I hear somebody laugh in my presence that I've said something to make them laugh. That kind of feels great, as well. And I know in the broadcasting world, you don't get that. I mean, you get some feedback, people message you here and there, but you say what you want to say, you say your one-liners, and then later people then comment years later, hey, you made me laugh when you said this. And I was like, oh, that's really special. Now that's just personal. That's just as a commentating world. But I think hopefully people could one day say he made a difference in their personal life or in the lives of people that they know. And that difference obviously varies, but definitely he enjoyed life. Everything that I do, I definitely enjoy, and I try to live it to the max. And so hopefully people can look back on that with a smile.
Well, yeah, that's a lovely thing to end on. And at the end of the day, for any of us that want to see more joy in the world, the only way there's going to be more joy in the world is if we put it there. And we need people like you to put it there, and people like that have a voice and scale to your voice. You have the ability to say a one-liner and make hundreds of thousands of people laugh. I say a one-liner and like my colleague laughs, right? Like, or not. They just say, come on, you're going to get that. So it's a fantastic thing to end on. And if we're absolutely going to anchor in one thing, you are known for your one-liners. What's your favorite one-liner to send us home with?
Oh, Griff, again putting me on the spot here. I enjoyed one at the 2019 Rugby World Cup when Kobus Reinach, scored for South Africa, and I said he's more dangerous than climate change, and so that was something I enjoyed. Or there's other ones I've used, which is Luke Hume scored for the USA and he sidestepped like 4 or 5 people, and I said he's got more steps than the Great Wall of China.
Fantastic. So even for the non-rugby players, they can probably comprehend those. Awesome. Thank you very much, Dallen Stanford. Thanks for putting smiles on for more people's faces today on Connecting with Purpose.
Griff, thanks so much for having me. I love what you do, my friend. Keep going strong.
Will do, mate. Cheers.
We're energized about this journey and hope you choose to join us. Click the subscribe button now so you don't miss out on all the actionable wisdom to come.